Performance task 3. It gives us three functions, f of x, g of x, and h of x. And then if we read the question, they want us to compare the three functions. So the first one says, it's asking which statement is true. The first one says that y-intercept for h of x, which is actually our table, is greater than the y-intercept for f of x. So we're going to need to compare those. We continue reading. Let's look. I'm still comparing f of x with h of x. I'm comparing all three of these. And what I'm trying to look for is the y-intercept for each one. So that's the first thing you want to identify. Let's go to our first function, which is f of x, highlighted here in yellow. And we want to identify the y-intercept. So the y-intercept is where our line is, where our graph is going to cross the y-axis. And that's right there. So if I take a look, my graph crosses my y-axis at this point. This is the point where y is equal to 1. So my y-intercept for f of x is going to be y equals to 1. So the equation might be a little bit harder, so let's go ahead and take a look at our table first. If we're looking at our table and we're looking for the y-intercept, the y-intercept is always when x is equal to 0. So I'm going to look at my graph. The y-intercept is when x is equal to 0. That's right here. And the y value there, whoops, is going to be -1. So for my y-intercept for h of x, it's a table, and I get -1. I'm not really sure how to do that with the recording. With the equation. So what you want to do is open up your calculator and change it into a table. Go to y equals and enter your equation, 3 to the x power plus 2. And now let's take a look at our table. And again, we're looking for when x is equal to 0. When x is equal to 0, y is equal to 3. So my y-intercept for g of x is going to be 3. So I'm comparing these, and what I notice is that g of x is more than f of x and h of x. Go ahead and read through your answer choices and see which one matches. Okay, the second problem asks us to graph a function. Anytime you want to graph something, you want to think about a table of values. So open up your calculator and let's enter that into y equals. To get our absolute value symbols, press math, go over to number, and press absolute. Okay, and we press x plus 1. On your calculator, you might see bars. That's okay. Let's open up our table of values. And these are some of the numbers we plotted. First, take a look at your graph. Okay, I know it's supposed to be a V shape. So when you are plotting these points over, just make sure that you get a V shape. So I got x, y. Some of the numbers that I want. Let's look for the turning point where the numbers start to repeat. That's here at -1, 0. So that'll be my middle number. And then I have -2, -3, 0, and 1. So for -1, I had 0, I have 1, 2, and 1, 2. -3, 2. That's that point right there. -2, 1. -1, 0. 0, 1. You'll see that we bounce back up like a V. 1, 2. And just because these are the only 5 values I have written, they're not the only 5 values you want to plot. So look at your calculator, see which other points you can plot. In fact, you can plot all of these. So transfer all of these points onto your paper. It's right there. And make sure you're plotting all the points until you are off the grid. And same thing on the other side. Let's go ahead and connect. Make sure you're using arrows. Okay, we go forever that way, and then forever on the other way also. We're done graphing. Let's read our question. State the range of the function. State the domain over which the function is increasing. So the range of my function talks about my y values. I notice all my y values have to be above this point. which is y is equal to 0. So if all my y values have to be greater than that point, we want to say that y is greater than or equal to 0. State the domain over which the function is increasing. So as we read our graph from left to right, my function is increasing in the highlighted parts. And that starts, remember when we're talking about domain, we're talking about our x value. So that starts when x is equal to -1. So x is greater than or equal to -1 is when we start to increase.